every overtake at Thompson. Okay, you clicked on this video. You saw the title, so you're probably thinking, this Marinara guy, I've seen his videos, he's pretty fast. He's probably going to show up to Thompson and start swerving on these parking cones in blue group. Well, I'm here to tell you that, sad story, I actually didn't. I ended up being a rolling roadblock. It almost looks like I left the house to go to Stop and Shop for groceries and somehow got lost on the way and ended up on a public racetrack. But what I'm about to tell you, though, is that somehow this footage that you're watching is what allowed me to set my personal best by over 7 seconds at Club Motorsports the following weekend. Now that sounds crazy, right? But Thompson, walking at Thompson, I said this to a friend of mine, that's just how I phrased it, that walking at Thompson is what allowed me to run at Club Motorsports. Now, we all know that Thompson doesn't have the best pavement, it's not the most polished track, but if your suspension is set up for your body, for your weight, whatever, if your suspension is even adequate, you will be fine. I had so many people try to talk me out of Thompson, and I went by myself, and it was absolutely amazing. So why did I think that it helped my riding so much? Well, here's the thing. So Thompson is really technical. I have a middleweight bike, and for middleweight bikes, especially 600s, 2 cylinders, really torquey machines that don't have a ton of horsepower, you know, like 200 plus or whatever, 180 plus, like all your leader bikes. This was a tight technical track, which means it really made me actually come to grips with the parts of my riding that I maybe needed a little bit of work on, right? Okay. Lots of corners required lots of trail braking, delicate trail braking that allowed you to hit the pivot point in some of these double apex corners, like under the bridge at Thompson and in turn 6 on the NASCAR oval. There's a lot of areas that polished my riding simply by showing up to Thompson. This track ended up being one of the greatest learning experiences that I've had at the track. And honestly, I think Thompson is probably, bar none, the best training course to actually work on your riding, not to just go out and enjoy, but to actually work on your riding that forces you to learn. The beauty of a track that's also barely over a mile and a half is that the laps only take a minute and a half is a decent lap. Decent, you know, you'll run in the 1 minute 20s in upper parts of blue group and maybe black group. But what is beautiful about a track that size is that each lap is really short. So when you have a problem corner or you have something that you really want to work on, it's almost like running drills, where if turn 5, let's say, under the bridge is your problem and you either come in there too slow or too hot, or your pivot points sucks, or your exit out of the corner is terrible, you can work on it in another minute. That's it. Like, it's so easy and quick to be able to work on the areas of your riding that need polishing because of the size of the track. So it just ended up being an awesome learning experience. I think from my first session to my last session, I gained something like 5 seconds, which on a track that's like only, the lap is only like a minute and 20 something, that's pretty good. So, but most importantly, it's not even just like the time, right? Like, people focus on just times by themselves, but they're not actually thinking about their riding, thinking about what skills they had to develop to get their times down. They're just looking at times, you know? I don't like to think that way. I like to focus on the areas of my riding that I obviously know need work, and that just brings lap time naturally without me having to think about it. So let's take a look at the last session. I'm not going to make you watch all my sessions, right? I think Thompson is the one track where I'm not going to upload my full session every session, simply because you already saw in the very first half of the video what happened most of the time. Of course, I got passed because I didn't even know where I was going. But I think let's just look at the last session in full, just so you can see where I started, you know, from the beginning of the video to what happened once I found my groove, once I found some confidence. I knew the lines of the track. I had a couple instructors tow me around, and I finally got to put it all together. So let's take a look at that now.